Hi, today we are doing zoology and we will start off with a brief revision of the 10th standard portion. So let me put the heading here. Revision class 10. Okay, so let's first start off with a cell. Now, what is a cell? A cell is the structural and functional unit of life. So let's write that down here. Unit of life. Okay. A cell is the structural and functional unit of life. Now, usually organisms are split into two different types on the basis of number of cells. We have uh, choose a different color for this. Take B. Okay. So cells are divided in two types. Uh, Organisms based on cells. We have unicellular and we have multicellular. Okay. So you all may be familiar with these terms. A unicellular organism only has one cell, whereas a multicellular organism has multiple cells, maybe hundreds or thousands. Examples of a unicellular organism would be bacteria, mostly bacteria, maybe some specific fungi or algae. We And examples of multicellular organisms will be animals and, and plants. Multicellular organisms are usually a lot more efficient than unicellular organisms, mainly because they have the they have more cells in them, which which allows these cells to be specialized. For example, specialized or differentiate. For example, we have the heart, which is a collection of a special type of cells which are evolved solely for the purpose of pumping blood. Or we have muscles, the stomach lining, etc. etc. So multicellular organisms are usually a lot more efficient. Now let's start with now let's move on to the different type. Uh, Now let's move on. A combination of cells gives you tissues. A combination of tissues gives you an organ. Combination of organs gives you an organ system. And combination of organ systems gives you an organism. Now let's move on to tissues. Let me get the color red. And let's start off with what are tissues. Tissues are a collection of highly specialized cells. So tissues they are a collection Specialized cells. Another, a more intricate way or a more descriptive way of saying this is tissues are made up of a group of cells having common origin or function. So let's write that instead. Tissues are made up of a group of cells having common origin or function. Okay. Now, the term tissue, the term tissue was coined by the French pathologist Bichat. French pathologist. And he is known as the father of histology. Now, histology is the study of tissues, or histology. And the term histology, wait, let's put an arrow, is coined by a scientist called Mayer. Okay, now we will move on to the different type of animal tissues. Animal tissues are are generally categorized into four types. We have the epithelial, we have the muscular, the connective, and the neural. Now, the epithelial tissue is further divided into two different types. We have simple epithelial tissue and compound epithelial tissue. The simple epithelial tissue is single layered, and the compound epithelial tissue has multiple layers. So only the bottom layer touches the membrane, the basement membrane, and the other layers are on top of each other. Now, examples of simple epithelial tissue would be squamous, cuboidal, columnar, ciliated, and the glandular tissue. And examples of epithelial compound tissue would be squamous and transitional. Squamous tissue is of two types, as you can see, simple and compound. Next, we have muscular. Examples of muscular tissue are striated muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. Then we have the connective tissue. Connective tissue again uh, is classified into three different types. First is the loose. These are usually soft or are not binded together. These are the areolar tissue and the adipose tissue. Then we have the dense tissue, the ligaments and the tendons, which are present between bones and muscles. Then we have the specialized tissue, which is of skeletal and the fluid type. Skeletal type, we have cartilage and bones, and fluid type, we have blood and lymph. And then we have the neural type, which is basically brain cells or nerve cells. Now, epithelial tissue have the highest power of regeneration, whereas neural tissues have the least. Now, let's move on to epithelium. Epithelium. Epithelium founded, was discovered by a scientist named Rush. R-Y, I spelled it wrong. Scientist called Rush. Ruy-sch. He coined epithelium. Then we have epithelial. The epithelial tissue makes up the outer and inner linings of the body. That's what it's in charge of, basically. So, epithelial tissue makes the outer and inner linings of the body. Now, the outer lining is basically referring to the skin, and inner linings are basically the linings of the organs. For example, the lining of the liver or the kidney or the esophagus, which is the food pipe. Now, uh, epithelial tissues are very tightly packed together. They are packed together like this. This is their basic structure from a two-dimensional point of view, like how the pattern of packing. As you can see, they are very tightly packed together. Tightly packed together. And there is no intercellular space. Let's make that a separate point. Second point is these cells are non-vascular, which means there is no blood flow in them. There is no blood supply. These cells are non-vascular, which means no blood supply. Okay. Now, again, on their structure, we will make another diagram. Again, if I am able to make a straight line, straight enough. So they are in the form of these cubical units, which are next to each other. Okay, so these individual units are the cell, these are the nucleus, and this is what is called is the basement membrane. Now the basement membrane is basically just acts as a platform for the cells to hold on. Now, if we consider this is the basement membrane, We will add small circles at the bottom of it. These run right under the basement membrane, and these are connective tissue. Now, some features of the basement membrane. The basement membrane is, let's change the color first. The basement membrane is acellular in nature. It is thin and elastic, and it is highly permeable. Permeable is the mm, permeable is the ability uh, of a membrane to let objects pass through it. So we will write. So this basement membrane is easily lets compounds or elements pass through. Highly permeable. Fine. Now the function. The function. The function of the basement membrane is to allow the diffusion of nutrients and gases from the internal connective tissue towards the outer epithelial cells. So let's write that. Allows diffusion of nutrients and gases from internal connective tissue to the outer epithelial cells. Uh, this basement membrane is bilayered. Even I've drawn it here as one line because it looks very thin, but actually it has two layers. Layer number one, layer number two. Now the upper layer is called the basal lamina, and the lower layer is called the fibrous lamina or the reticular epithelial cell. I will as the fibrous lamina. The basal lamina here is made of micropolysaccharides, so mucopolysaccharides, mucopolysaccharides, glycoproteins. Uh, glyco means fat, and glyco is the storage of fat, and protein is protein. So it is the mixture of fats and proteins. Now, this mixture is secreted by the epithelial cells. We start right this way. This concoction of mucopolysaccharides and glycoproteins is made by the epithelial cells. No, the lower layer, which is the fibrous lamina, is made of collagen or reticular fibers, which is also called as reticular fibers. Now, this is made by the internal connective tissue, which we saw here, these little circles. Let me write this a bit closer together. So that is it for today. Thank you.